It all started on 31st May 2009 when Air France Flight 447 departed Brazil International Airport for Paris at approximately 10:30 p.m. as per its schedule. There were a total of 228 people in the flight at that time, consisting of 216 passengers and 12 crew members. The flight was going to take approximately 12 hours of time to reach Paris, and that's why passengers were just sitting with ease and some of them were taking a nap on their respective seats. About 3 hours had elapsed after takeoff, and the plane was flying at its normal speed without any hindrance. Everything was going on just as planned, and there was nothing to worry about till 1:30 a.m. The pilots were commanding the plane, whereas all the passengers were sleeping comfortably. Now, as that plane had moved a little further by now in the direction of the sea, suddenly the contact of that plane broke with ATC. Point to be mentioned here is that usually whenever the plane flies over the sea, it generally loses contact with ATC and then automatically reconnects to air traffic control of another area after some time. There was no immediate reaction from air traffic control, and they just formally noted the time when the Flight 447 got far away than the range of that particular air traffic control. And after doing this formality, they again got busy in their respective tasks. But the trouble started when the plane was not connected to any other ATC even after half an hour was passed. And then, when this information was thoroughly investigated, it was confirmed that Flight 447 did not connect with any other ATC across the globe. There was no trace of the plane in the last half hour, which clearly meant that either the plane must have crashed somewhere after getting stuck in some big trouble, or it might still be facing some big trouble. Therefore, the ATC department immediately took all the actions and traced the last location of the plane and sent some fighter planes to search for it. After a lot of research, the result came out was tragic, because many pieces of the plane were found floating in the water next morning, which simply meant that the plane had crashed. But no one was able to understand how this accident took place so suddenly, because when all the testing was done before the flight took off, the plane met all the parameters and was good to go. Surprisingly, there was no shortage of fuel too. And on top of all this, when the plane was last contacted by any ATC, at that time the pilot did not give any sign of mayday, due to which the sinking of the ship became a matter of mystery. The plane was now broken into pieces, but the questions have just begun to arrive. As soon as this news came out in public, it spread like fire. Everyone was interrogative about this mysterious crash. Everyone was just hallucinating that any other force had also played a role in this crash. After the news came out, the family members of all the passengers on board started worrying about their family members. They all were just filled with doubts and anger, and as soon as they approached, they started asking about the crash. But at that time, ATC was itself clueless, and that's why they just remained silent and gave no response to the family members. Later on, a special team was found in order to find the black box of the plane. Specially trained scuba divers and a team of many specialists became a part of this search team. But unfortunately, after a lot of effort and a long search, only the bodies of 50 passengers could be recovered. And even after this, the rest of the plane and the black box was not found. After 12 months of relentless efforts, finally the research team also accepted their defeat and finally admitted that it's now impossible for them to find the black box of the plane. But the crash was still a mystery, due to which on 3rd April 2011, a private organization formed a search team named WHO, whose job was to find the black box of the plane by any means. Now, this specialized team was using automated vehicles instead of manpower, which made this task easier and efficient. In this way, while searching using modern technology, they had found a large part of the ship, from which they also retrieved the voice recorder of the cockpit. And as soon as the voices captured in that voice recorder were heard, everything was clarified as to what actually made this crash happen. Actually, after listening to the audio recording, all came to know that at the time when the plane's contact with ATC was lost, the plane was facing a big problem. The plane got stuck into a ferocious storm, and the pilot realized this mess when he had gone so deep inside the storm, making it nearly impossible to bring the plane back due to bad weather and the darkness of the night. Apart from this, the plane was at such an altitude at which the temperature there was touching the figure of -40 degrees Celsius, due to which suddenly the impact of nature on the plane intensified, and the situation went from bad to worse. It seems like God itself was not in favor of the pilots too, because there were 3 pilots in the plane at that time, among which the most experienced one named Marc Dubois had gone to sleep at that moment, due to which the situation was now being handled by the most inexperienced pilot of the crew who had never faced such a situation before. Both of the inexperienced pilots became restless and were unable to handle the situation until the shadow of haste and fear. Now, under normal circumstances, the autopilot mode of the plane has such features that even in a thunderous storm, it can get the plane out of trouble without any human intervention. But perhaps destiny did not want to help them that day, because due to extreme drop in temperature, most of the sensors stopped working. And because of this, the autopilot mode was not getting any information either about the plane's altitude, direction, or anything else, making it of no use in this condition. It still functioned for some time, but eventually stopped working completely after a few minutes. Slowly, the plane was also now leaning to the left, and seeing this, the pilots took control of the plane and started pulling its steering wheel called yoke to the right to keep the plane straight. Due to this, the plane sometimes started tilting to the right and sometimes to the left. The plane kept moving in the air with instability like this for about 3 to 4 minutes. But then the pilot made the biggest mistake of this whole incident by pulling the yoke backwards. Pulling the yoke backwards increases the altitude of the plane. The plane was already flying at a high altitude, and after this command, the plane's height was now reaching a terrible level. The plane was trying to go as upwards as it could with its full force, while the icy winds were also hitting the plane continuously, due to which the speed of the plane gradually started decreasing. There was pin-drop tense silence in the cockpit at that time, but then, all of a sudden, many sirens sounded simultaneously inside the ship. This was the higher altitude alarm warning the pilots that the plane was now heading beyond its limits. The experienced pilot Mark woke up by listening to this alarm, and when he came out, he saw that the plane's condition was at its worst. Without even wasting a second, he took control of the plane into his hands. He first tried to move the yoke stick of the plane so that its nose could come under control, but while sitting on the other seat, the co-pilot still pulled the side stick back. In this way, due to the opposite instructions, the plane's computer also got confused and could not take the right decision, due to which the nose of the plane was not able to come down at all. Mark was trying to figure out what actually went wrong, but could not find out the real reason behind this mess. Everyone was doing their best, but no one noticed that the co-pilot's yoke was still backwards. He was trying its best to control the plane. But then finally, that moment also came when the control of the plane was lost from the hands of both pilots. The plane stopped as if it was frozen like a stone in the sky and slowly started falling down. In the midst of this fall, suddenly the co-pilot realized that he had pulled the side stick in the wrong direction. But alas, by the time he realized this, it was too late, and now the plane had reached a condition in which it was neither able to fly nor glide, but on the contrary, that ship was going down very fast. Meanwhile, the death bell started ringing loudly in the form of a ground proxy meeting alarm, indicating that the plane is very close to the Earth. But this alarm was now pointless, as the 3 pilots were watching themselves marching towards death, along with all 216 passengers and staff members. At this time, everyone was just waiting for some miracle, but all hopes vanished, and finally Flight 447 collided inside the sea. And with this crash, the existence of hundreds of lives became history. Have you ever experienced such a near-death experience in your life? Let me know in the comments down below.